So hello and welcome. Today I'm going to be taking a look at Stronghold HD. Now Stronghold HD is actually simply a patch to a former game that was released in 2001 by Firefly Studios called Stronghold. And this simple title was at the time very well received, but since then it has been overshadowed by the success of its successor, namely Stronghold Crusader. So starting out at the main menu of the game, you have a somewhat classical menu style here that was found in the games of its time. Although it is nowhere near as direct as current titles are, it is functional, and since the HD patch was released, you can now actually access the options directly from the main menu. This was a change from the original version of the game, in which the only way to adjust critical options such as video settings or sound options was actually going into a scenario or a campaign and launching the game. So this is definitely a welcome change, and let's take a look at some of the gameplay options that are available. Pretty much, this is pretty simple stuff here. You can adjust the actual game speed anywhere from 10 to 90. Nobody really knows what those numbers signify. It is a largely arbitrary number, and really it only comes with any real meaning in Stronghold 2, in which the game speed was actually tied to the frame rate, unfortunately, which resulted in very choppy playing experience. If, say, you were playing at speed 10, you'd only be getting 10 frames a second. I believe the default is 40. Just keep that at 30, so it's a little bit slower. When it comes to video options, you'll notice now that when it comes to the resolution, the HD version of Stronghold HD, well, it supports displays up to 2K. In my case, I'm only running on a full HD display, so I'm keeping it at 1920 by 1080, scroll speed, and you can change your cursor. Sound options, pretty bare bones. If you adjust the sound in some way you don't like, you can just hit these buttons and it will return to the default sound. For some reason, you can't actually mute individual ones. You can't mute music, for example. But you could just turn it all the way off, so not important anyway. The real meat of the game lies in its campaigns. Now there are two different ones. One is focused on building economy, and the other one is focused on more militaristic approach to the game. In addition to the military campaign and economic campaigns, you can both download and play user-created maps known as invasions and sieges. And of course, there is a multiplayer aspect of the game. Now, when it comes to the multiplayer aspect of the game, it is still functional. If you're using Game Ranger, you can still find games to play with other people online, although the scene for it is much smaller than Stronghold Crusader HD. So I would recommend that if you're really looking for a multiplayer game of Stronghold online, you would be best off if you arranged it beforehand with somebody you knew, either via forum or Skype or any similar communication system. But I understand that all of this is probably a little bit boring, so let's actually choose a scenario here. I'm going to choose one of the later ones so we have a better idea of what the full game looks like and get started. There will be some exposition by the characters, and you'll be given your objectives in the game. The difficulty can be adjusted from anywhere easy to normal to very hard. We'll just stick with normal. And here you have the actual game. Zooming out, you can see the map is fairly small once you put it on an HD display, but it is nonetheless big enough to actually have some decent fun on. Now, it should be noted that maps that support multiplayer games will be a lot larger, so you'll actually be able to build a full castle. In this case, this map really doesn't do a good job of showcasing what a full castle would look like, but I will demonstrate a better looking castle in another scenario after we go through some of the various defenses. So starting off, if anybody is really familiar with the Stronghold formula, you'll know that there are no hard counters when it comes to units. For example, right here we have some archers in the tower. There is no hard counter to any of the units that you build, rather there are soft counters. So you're not going to be playing rock, paper, scissors with any of this. I don't think I actually needed to build the barracks, or maybe I did. A lot of the time you spend in this game, you will be underpowered, and this means you're going to be using very basic troops to kill more advanced troops. So while you see a whole bunch of different troops available here in the barracks, most of the troops that you will be building will be archers and probably macemen. through the majority of the campaign. And I'm going to also demonstrate some of the better siege work, let's say, because there are certain scenarios where you will be placed in charge of a garrison and asked, or commanded really, to storm a castle. The economics of the game are fair. You have 4 different food types, and there's also the hops farm, which produces ale. Now, it should be noted that unlike the settlers, there is really only one very entailed food production chain, and that is of bread. To make bread, you'll need a wheat farm, a windmill, which it doesn't appear we actually have, and a bakery. So let's put that windmill down. And when it comes to resources, you have wood, stone, iron, and pitch. Now, pitch is just used for building pitch ditches, like what you see here, and using boiling oil. And you're going to need engineers to make boiling oil. Once you have an engineer with some boiling oil, you can position them on a wall or wherever, and then you can command them to pour the oil. And this is very much different from other games really that were set in this era, or this time, such as the late 90s, early 2000s, when a lot of the fire effects that you would see on a building would be simply there to indicate the relative destruction of that building. In Stronghold HD, fire is actually a mechanic of the game and can be used to great effect to actually damage enemy units and even enemy buildings. In this case, I'm probably going to end up damaging my own buildings, so we're just focused on this attack right here. Now, it looks like we are under a bit of a threat here. This trebuchet is doing a fair amount of damage. Let's see. I don't have any infantry. So let's see if we can lure the knights in with the archers. Okay, this is looking fairly bad. My peasants are being struck by a disease lobbed in with cows. Yes. The wolf is actually attacking my peasants. And there we have a couple more cows coming in. So, you have that. It's little unique things like that that sort of add some real atmosphere, lend the game some real character. Can't spit that out for some reason. And I probably should repair this. There we go. So where was I? Yes, you can set things on fire. If I can get my my engineers over here. Here we have some swordsmen approaching, and I just got locked out of my gatehouse. I'm going to have this archer fire on the pitch ditch, and well, it's damaging the swordsman a little bit. Not a whole lot though. You can see the killing pits that the swordsmen are walking over, damaging them. And a lot of the battles, believe it or not, in the campaign of Stronghold HD are kept to this very small scale. While Stronghold Crusader boasts excessive units in the numbers ranging up to 10,000, in the original Stronghold, most of the battles were kept very small and personal. You didn't often have more than, I would say, 100 troops on the screen at the same time, even in more epic battles. So this is a fair example of what a siege looks like in Stronghold. You got your trebuchets. I'm not sure you can actually see them because they're hiding, but there you have a couple of trebuchets. You got a few knights protecting them. The AI is pretty basic, but at the same time, I'm going to release those war dogs before the swordsman kills. The war dogs are simply just wolves, and they will attack the swordsman and ultimately die because they're very weak, but that's what you have. I was going to say, though, that the AI is fairly basic. If you recall correctly, in Stronghold Crusader, one of the main additions to that game was the fact that they actually had an AI that could play all by itself. That simply doesn't exist in Stronghold HD, and the AI is pretty much set up by a system of checkpoints. where you tell in the scenario editor where the AI should enter the game, and they will proceed to enter at that point and then ransack or what have you their surrounding area. See, I'm doing pretty badly here, but as a final out, let's set something on fire. So here we have the engineer, and I'm going to command him to pour oil all over the armory. So you can see the armory is now on fire, and the fire will actually spread to nearby buildings unless I take care of it. In this case, I don't have a well, so as you can see, my granary just started on fire, as did my hovel. And if there were units in there, so for example I put these swordsmen in there, they will burn to death. So this is definitely one of the more unique aspects of this game. So here we have a map with a little bit of a better idea of what you can build with a castle, because that is really what Stronghold touts itself as, is a castle building simulator. And it is really one of the reasons that I like it more over more popular RTS games such as maybe StarCraft, which don't focus quite as much on building as they do on combat. And while there are enough units in Stronghold to make the combat interesting, it really, by today's standards, it is pretty basic, especially given the fact that there are no hard counters. So what you have right here is a very simple castle that is in need of repair. So you can start tearing it down and rebuilding it as you like. And one of the features that newer Stronghold games don't have is the ability to dig moats. And this was frequently bemoaned because moats are a really neat little addition to the game, and they add some character. Like I said before, it really is what makes Stronghold stand out from other games, RTS games from that time period. Unfortunately, when it comes to moats, the AI is super weak on that front, and just simply can't navigate around them, it seems like, which ultimately led to them being largely exploited against AI opponents. Now, this castle might seem it might seem like a mix, it's a mash of a whole lot of different stuff, but the foundation of it is pretty simple. When you go into your castle buildings, the tab on the production menu, you will have stone walls, and these can be placed individually as so. You place a whole bunch of them to create a long wall. You can add crenulations to the wall to give your units on the wall additional protection against enemy fire. That's not working so well because I need to rotate the camera. But that gives you an idea right there. You can build little towers, so I could add a tower right here. You can see the castle's already coming to life. And then I probably want to add a gatehouse. Add a stone gatehouse. And right there you have a pretty good idea already of what a castle is going to start to look like. I can put some stairs on it so that my units can access the top. Now, it is true that any wall with a gatehouse on it provides immediate access to the walls, but if you want to be able to access the walls when the gatehouse is closed, for example if you're under siege, it's very important to actually have placed stairs leading up to the wall. In addition to stone walls, there are also wood walls, and these are ultimately less popular because the defense they provide is notorious for being very weak, and they also can't have troops stationed upon them. In addition to the stone wall, in addition to the wood walls, there is also a wooden gatehouse, which, like the walls, is notoriously weak, especially for how much it costs, but it serves its purpose as a preliminary defense. So right there you see what the main attraction to the Stronghold franchise is, and what really set it apart from other RTSs of the day, and really what still sets it apart from modern day RTS games. And that pretty much applies to all the Stronghold games in the series. Now, unlike Crusader, Stronghold HD is set in medieval Europe, so the aesthetic, the art style, it's going to be a bit different. It's a lot of green, a lot of grass, and I personally prefer it over the rather bland look of the desert. But you know, the Stronghold Crusader game was much more technologically advanced when it came to AI opponents, and therefore it never was able to compete on the same level with the original Stronghold. When it comes to actual attacking, you may have noticed that I really haven't done any of that. But right here we have a nice little scenario loaded up, and believe it or not, the game is really dragging the frame rate down. I'm down to 40 frames a second on this. But this is how the siege works. So you have various soft counters such as crossbowmen, macemen, spearmen, knights of course, which are very fast and highly armored mounted units, archers, which provide a nice balance between speed and damage, and of course swordsmen. Unfortunately, my units are all taking damage from a ballista, obviously positioned in this tower, so we're probably going to want to build maybe a trebuchet. You build siege units by using engineers. Yes, my swordsmen are taking a good deal of damage right there for that, and you can always throw the engineers out of their existing siege equipment to build new stuff. So then we're going to build a, here we go, gotta get those swordsmen, intercept those knights. We're going to build a trebuchet, and we'll be using that to attempt to focus on this tower. And we want to use a shield. We're going to put a shield right in front of it. This will help protect against ranged units. I might want to put a shield by the swordsman as well. One thing that I really don't like about Stronghold is the fact that the shields and siege equipment in general are very finicky in a sense, because you can see the stone is starting to do damage. They're finicky in a sense because you can always eject the engineers from them, which means that sometimes when you're walking around the place you accidentally eject them. When it comes to trebuchets though, of course, they are mounted in place, and unlike later games in the Stronghold franchise, cannot be unpacked and moved later. So make sure you think well beforehand upon where you will really want to put it, because once it's put there, it's staying there. So we are getting a little bit of action. The wolf is sending some knights out to attempt to intercept my siege equipment, but my crossbowmen largely are dealing pretty well with them. Crossbowmen, of course, are, while a soft counter unit, are excellent against armored units. And unfortunately, that tower is still not down, so let's build another trebuchet. Put it right there. It's obviously within range. Get a shield to protect it, and hopefully we'll get it down. Now, I'm not actually going to finish completing the scenario because that would obviously be besides the point, but I would like to tear that tower down, and that is really where the castle siege mechanics come into play, because you're not going to be really realistically getting into this castle without first breaking some of its defenses down. And as I noted before, you can build moats around your castles to really bolster your defenses, and that's the case with the wolf here. He has a moat built all the way around his castle, which means my units will not be able to get in without first digging the moat up. So very important to remember. Let's get this other trebuchet on it, and unfortunately, okay, I couldn't actually target that tower. And as you can see, the tower just fell down, and I'm using my other trebuchet to attempt to target the gatehouse. Now likely there is going to be some traps hidden in this ground right here in front of the castle, so we're going to want to send some troops to sort of scout it out first, and you'll likely want to send your most your trashiest troops, your cannon fodder. See, take a look at that. Pretty magnificent, isn't it? The fire effects in this game are really a sight to behold. So we've already come across a couple of pitch ditches. Whoa, look at that. Some killing pits, as you can see right there in the ground. Let's see if we can make it over here to these warhounds and see if they get released from their cages and attack me. So there we go. Beautiful. Unfortunately, he set his own place on fire. Oh, I actually did that to him when I knocked down his smelter. So a lot of my trash units, they have taken the damage. They have really, you know, tripped a lot of the traps that were hidden right before this castle. Now you can start sending your more valuable units in an attempt to take it. So the next step, of course, would logically be to dig up the moat here. But that's really all that I was doing this scenario right here for, so we're going to quit this mission and cover a couple more things before I'm done. And that is the economics campaign. The economics campaign is largely just more castle building than anything else. you're going to be presented with several economic challenges in an attempt to sort of race against the timer in a lot of them. So gather X amount of food, or build X number amount of weapons. That is largely what the economic games are based upon. The map editor, of course, is very interesting if you really want to get into the map designing aspect of the game. There are some very good maps out there, some that I've seen on forums that have taken the makers years to make. So there's a very small and dedicated fan base that makes maps. And of course you can load a saved game. So that pretty much covers what Stronghold HD is all about. As always, thank you very much for watching. I hope you found this interesting, and I hope to see you next time.